This month's audiobook that I've released is a cover of Philip K. Dick's The Eyes Have It, regular narration only and audio drama production with sound effects. Up there next week, the North American fantasy based book sale, genre sale starts. I'm curating that. I think we have like 20 titles in it. Still room if we have any stragglers coming in. Have been putting together the promo materials and stuff. So look for that to get announced next Wednesday early in the morning when it goes live. And then last thing is I'm trying to wrap up Bloody Sepulchre. I know I've been talking about this thing for a long time, but it takes a long time to do original work in general. I think the writing process took as long as I thought it would, maybe a little bit longer. I'd like to be able to speed that up for the next piece that I write. But this just involves so much research, and I wanted to really flesh out a world that seemed realistic and tangible within the context of the story. Hopefully that occurs. The audiobook, while the narration only read, has been done and edited for a couple of weeks now, I think. The audio drama production, there's like 100 sound effects in it, which just magnifies the complexity of everything. I've only begun to start doing mixing. I haven't done any of the panning and stuff like that yet to really kind of like build out the stereo presence of all those sound effects and stuff, which is going to take a little while. I'll make some very like concrete decisions on it. I already kind of know how I want it to go, but it's all work. You have to actually spend the time doing it. So I'll probably take 2 passes on that, do a mix down, and then man, I really, really, really want to get that loaded up by Friday. That was kind of like my burn date on that, so that I can get it out by the middle of May. And it takes 10 business days to get approved from them. So Friday, really, I really got to get it turned out that day so that I can meet my deadlines. The other side there is, it's like half an hour, which is just under 6,000 words. It takes a while to work your way through all that stuff. I didn't have to do a whole lot of punch-ins. I would say maybe less than a dozen line fixes, some of which were a result of things I caught in the text as I was just really literally wrapping up the ebook and shipping that to KDP. So these sorts of things, occur when you're doing it on your own. And I would say at least I have the flexibility to do that just by the nature of being an indie writer, being in indie publishing, and kind of handling, being so directly hands-on with every facet of the production. If you were working with like people far away and printers that you can't basically change out the files at any given time, then it has to really be buttoned up to ship. But luckily, that process is very streamlined when you're dealing with KDP. So it's just a matter of updating the files, making sure everything is good down the line. So for me, what I would do is, while I was doing the audiobook reading, which I do before I publish the ebook, if I catch a change or if I want to make a change while I'm doing that reading, I just update the actual document, export that document to the formats that I need. In this case, for the ebook, it's going to be a KPF file, which is what Kindle Create uses. Take a quick look through Kindle Create to make sure it's all kind of reflowable for this particular layout, and then save those changes, do that export, and then upload that export to KDP And it those changes, they tell you, it could take up to 72 hours, but I've never really had it take more than a handful of hours, in all honesty. They stay with that pretty quickly. So yeah, fantastic process on that side of things. Now the audiobook, you aren't necessarily working with KDP. You have to work with other platforms to get it onto Audible and, along down the line as well. The thing there becomes basically, if it's 10 business days for approval, then you got to kind of work your way back from your release date. And every little change in audio kind of cascades in some ways, because there are different effects that you're using, like production tools, like compression and limiting, all kinds of little things that happen with EQ. So like for some of the sound effects in this, I'm actually taking a couple of sounds and I'll bounce them down into one file so I can work with that one clip instead of 8 clips, which is to say that if you end up wanting to change something, you have to go back to the original files, make that change there, then export that, then pull it back in, and then, replace that file and work with it. You can keep all those things as independent files. It just makes it a much bigger workspace. So sometimes I'll compress that stuff just so it's like a little bit easier to not get lost in this stuff, because even doing that, I still have like 8 tracks of audio across the board on this thing, which is not a lot, but at the same time, simplify things a little bit. And again, like when you're dealing with all of those components, say you want to like drop the audio down below the speaking. Well, if you have 8 tracks, then you have to adjust 8 tracks to do that. If you have it bounced down to 1, then you only have to adjust that 1. So it makes it considerably easier in that sense. This is kind of nitty gritty technical details, but stuff to consider, depending on how far along you want to get into media production and audio specifically, the variety of books and stuff that you can offer up. And again, like these sort of audio concerns also play into video. And if you're trying to kind of translate between all these different media types, then that's something you have to be concerned with in general. For me, I find the challenge is good, but not always. Let me rephrase here. I suppose the challenges are good, and the outcomes are usually good along those same lines. For books, for audiobooks, like my audiobooks sell 2 to 1 in comparison to ebooks and paperbacks. But you don't have the audiobook if you didn't write the book, right? You have to actually have words to read into the microphone. So something to consider. And then if you're doing video, again, video is going to need something to narrate or for the characters to be saying. That stuff can translate to words. I've also kind of done these short films where I'll pull the sound effects or music from that and then layer that into the audiobooks, which builds out the kind of soundscaping and the experience that you have with that stuff. So, these are all things to think about, how to like manage the interplay of the media and the tools and stuff like that. I think once you kind of get rolling with it, it becomes easier. But when you're doing it for the first time, it feels like a lot. I know, my first audiobook, I'm trying to think how long it took me to do, mostly because of, it's not long either. It's not even an hour long. But the thing there is I was using slightly different equipment. I was using a condenser mic, which is powered and very sensitive. And just trying to do a certain thing with it because I knew I was going to use it for the voiceover of the documentary. So that production was pretty arduous, to manufacture that audio using a condenser. Now I just use a dynamic mic, which is not powered in the same way. I mean, obviously there's electricity, but it's not what we call a powered mic. It's a dynamic mic. And it saves me a load of time on editing because it's just not as hot a mic, so it doesn't pick up all these little incidental things. And then, if you have to go back and do punch-ins, because it was picking up incidental noise and environmental noise or whatever, it's just extra work, extra steps that you have to go through. It's also a bigger mic. Not that really matters, but when it comes down to the amount of work that you're going to end up doing, I just find it to be not worthwhile to use a condenser when I'm doing the productions on my own. If I was working in a studio with an engineer and maybe a producer, that would be a different story. But to simplify and streamline these processes as an indie producer of this stuff, I think that that's valuable. And I think it's important for all of us to make it as easy for ourselves to get the work out and to build momentum for the things that we're making, as opposed to worrying about them being perfect on day one of launch. We can make them as good as we can. We can always come back and clean stuff up, change things, improve things as we learn more. But I think that it's better to do the experiments, see what is landing with an audience, see how to take advantage of the platforms and the tools and put stuff out there and do that test and see how it goes. I'm not in the camp of sit and perfect something behind closed doors forever. You just don't have forever. And again, there's stuff that I'll work on for long periods of time. Projects that have very longitudinal shelf life, where I come back to that stuff and kind of explore the media again. Chicago 1893 is one of those projects. The national parks projects are that same way, where you can use new technology and kind of breathe some additional life into this stuff. I think that that's important when you're looking at the amount of time. We have a lot of time. We just don't have forever. And since 2019, I put out a paperback every year, which has been a streak I did not imagine was going to be the way that it is currently. When I started, didn't know I was going to do audiobooks when I first started. Didn't know I was going to do a documentary when I first started. All these things kind of creep up and present themselves as opportunities. And I think that you want to take advantage, if you can, and see where it gets to. It's because of, making a shot at it that I was able to premiere the documentary in a legit theater, able to get other stuff into contests and film contests and stuff like that. Keep pushing with books, make, a bunch of podcast appearances talking about whatever, the project I was putting out at the time or working on, and promote across the board. to make yourself an entity, people to gain awareness, to engage with the things that you're working on in meaningful ways. I think that's kind of why we're all doing this stuff in general, you know. It's nice to create things, but we can create things without ever putting it out into the world and having, you know, people engage with it. We don't have to do that. That's like an extra step. You know, we could play music at home for no one, you know, just for ourselves, for our own enjoyment. We could write for our own enjoyment, make movies for our own enjoyment. But as soon as you're kind of putting them out into the world and letting people connect with that stuff, then I think it becomes a situation where you really want to grow the attention or appreciation, understanding for it, and things like that. So, you know, that's my thinking on it. Oh, geez. Yeah, I'm working on some other projects too. There's, okay, so another short story and audiobook based on the short film I did earlier this year, the Anunnaki short. That is shaping up. So that'll come out in June. So I have to basically, as soon as I finish this Bloody Sepulchre piece, I got to turn around and get started on that. Now that production will go a lot faster. It's shorter. It's much, much shorter. And all the sound effects are basically already there. I'm just going to kind of gather that stuff up and dump it into the new program and get rolling. Shouldn't take anywhere near as long to complete. The editorial is already done. I'll probably make some tweaks to it as I typically do when I'm doing the audiobook performance, but I think I'm going to do that reading next week. Because this will, you know, again, the project I'm working on right now is basically rounding third base and getting ready. I'm about to do the audiobook cover for it, and I have all those assets together. So like that's the thing too, is to like get good at organization and make sure that you have like naming conventions and folder kind of cascading folder design so that you can find all this stuff and you know kind of which folders you put it in. I think, again, like when you're starting out and you're just doing your first project in whatever genre or format or whatever, then you're making all these decisions, but like don't force yourself to make the decisions every single time. Like just default to some easy processes so you can do the work and turn out the work. You know, that's the thing for me is, you know, I wouldn't be able to be manufacturing an audiobook every month, an ebook most of the months this year. And I got a video series I'm trying to wrap up for volume 3 of the National Park stuff. I'm doing the music for that as well. So writing that music and performing a lot of it or all of it, to be honest. But it's really about being able to kind of like keep notes, keep really good notes, to be able to jump back into something and know where you are. Even if you haven't touched it in a couple of weeks or a month, you know, as deadlines, you impose these deadlines and you're doing other work and you're living life and stuff to be able to get your mind right back to where you were. The last moment that you touched it and were working on it is critical, because then you're not losing time trying to like revisit the decisions that you made or find where the assets are. You know, if you are keeping track of all that stuff and naming everything easily, whether that's the folders or the individual files, then you'll be able to jump back in there really quick, and you know, it won't be a mess. It'll be easy, or at least easier. And this is something that for me has been going back like years. There's stuff I'm revisiting occasionally where I have to go back and look at these files, and they're from 6 years ago. um, if I hadn't done sort of the work to basically catalog all that stuff and make it easy to find, there'd be just no way to be able to manufacture stuff in timely ways. Like, for example, the first documentary for Chicago 1893, I did that it took me 2 years, really, from the first words written to dealing with the photographs to getting it uploaded to Amazon Prime. It was basically 2 years. When I remade that documentary last year, now admittedly, the version that I turned out is just over half as long. Maybe it's 3/5 as long, let's say, as the original cut. And it used AI. But it was because I had that script already there. I was able to rework the script, work with all those images to push them, colorize them, and push them into Runway and the other platforms that I used at the time. And then do that edit. I had all the music assets. I had all this, the text and editorial. I had to re-record the entire script, obviously, but this is the X time I've done this, so I'm very familiar with it. Very familiar with kind of the emotional presentation I'm trying to make with it, and was able to manufacture that AI cut, which is again, 3/5 the runtime. I was able to do that in just over 2.5 months, which, if you're, keeping track, going from about 2 years to 2.5 months, is quite a push, I have to say. And I did that while I was doing other stuff too. But again, it's about organization and kind of being really familiar with the media, being really familiar with the tools, being really familiar with the processes, and being able to hammer it out. But I think anybody can do that. That's the thing too. I really think that, there's nothing stopping anyone from being able to be organized, be creative, manufacture work, and get it out the door. It's really, I think we get paralyzed sort of by our decision-making process. We don't necessarily have like the heuristic decision-making process where it's like, if X, then, I'm going to do this. If Y, then I'm going to do this. If Z, I'm doing this. If X and Y, I'm doing this. If Y and Z, I'm doing this. To just have those decisions, the circumstances will present themselves, and you can basically jump to the end point. Like, this is what I do whenever these occur. And I know I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to execute on it. That to me is basically, that's my process. Not to, make it sound special. It's not. It's basically just, at this stage of things, like I've got like a dozen audiobooks out now. Jaji, what's up? Hey, I'll pass you a mic. I've been yakking for a while. Oh yeah, the base book sale starts next week as well. I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to toss in there, but I still got some space.
Was that the North American one?
Yeah, North American Fantasy.
I do, actually. I just have to figure out. I do have one. I just have to figure out how to put it on sale properly. I'll try to do that today.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, make sure to get that going, because like I'm doing all the prep and promo creation stuff for that right now. So
yeah, I have my whole series takes place in North America for the most part, but I have one volume that has all this stuff from. I have a friend who is the guy who on Halloween night tells the story of the Headless Horseman at the church in Sleepy Hollow.
Cool.
He's like the official storyteller. And he wrote a book on all the many, many different spooks and creatures that are mentioned in that poem. Because it's not just the Headless Horseman. They tell a lot of ghost stories, and the ghost stories are all the real ghost stories people from that world, that area of the world believe. And a lot of them appear in one of my books. I was going to use that one because it was
oh, that's awesome.
Most North American mythology in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do hurry if you need help sorting that out.
I'll do it this afternoon.
Yeah, there's I don't know if you have to do it through the kind of scheduling and programming, but if your ebook is below 3 megabytes, you can manually change the price.
I'm going to try that. If that doesn't work, I'll put it up on BookFunnel and I'll just make it free.
Oh, well, it's up to you. Yeah. But I'd love to have your book in there, especially if it's never been in the based book sale before, because then I put it in the new titles.
Yeah, this is book 3. I've had book 1 in the base, but I've never put book 3 on sale, so it would be new to the sale.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, please keep me posted, and if you want, I can send you a reminder in like a day or 2.
Nah, I'll do it as soon as we're done here.
Okay, cool. Well, then in that case, put a comment on the post on Substack so that Hans and I have all the information.
Will do.
Dope. Thank you. Yeah. What else have you been working on? Where you been?
So what I'm working on is the last 2 days I was putting together a list, which I probably should add you to, for every time on Twitter, somebody says, who's a good writer in the whole kind of, libertarian, conservative based world. I always put some people, and then I feel really embarrassed because I left off someone I know really well.
That happens.
So I decided I wanted a master list. So I have it on my blog and my Substack. I'm trying to list everybody who's kind of in our field so that there's a spot where somebody says, who are the superversive writers, or, who are the Iron Age guys, or any of these things. I can go, here's a link.
Yeah.
I spent the last 24 hours practically just doing that. And I'm doing some editing, and I'm working on the book I'm working on now. But the last day or 2, I've been working on that. So anybody who wants to be added, just let me know. The ideal thing is to send me a tweet, and then I'm putting in people's Twitter, their blog, or their Substack if they want, and Amazon link.
Yeah. Well, I would say, put me on there. You got my Twitter. You've got
it. I will.
You can put my website up there, or my Substack, or whatever is convenient for you or easy. My handle on Substack is some combination of MDF365. There might be a underscore in between them. I don't know, but it's linked on my website as well. So it's all up there. If you search Michael Finney, I'm easy to identify.
I'll send you the link, and then you can send me any information I don't have.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. What's the book you're working on?
So I'm writing this long series that's set at a magic school on the Hudson, but I'm taking time off at the moment to write 2 Regency romances set in the same background. So they're part Regency romance and part fantasy, and
they take place in the same world, you're saying?
Yeah, they're 200 years before my other books.
Interesting.
So I am 3/4 done with the first one, and really eager to get done with them and back to the main books. But I really like them, and they give me a chance to work out a bunch of background stuff that will then be useful to have established for the later books, which is why I'm working on them now. But it's really interesting. I love romance, but I wrote one years and years ago that I never finished when I was young, but I've never written one otherwise. And there's all sorts of challenges to it that are different than what I normally do. So I'm learning a lot. I had to rewrite the first half 3 times, but now it's moving along really quickly. And I'm looking forward to it and to the second one. And both of them have a co-author, but the co-author is different. So,
that's wild. How does that work? for you?
Well, they were role-playing games played by email. So it's me and the player.
Oh, that's right. You talked about this before.
Yeah. So each case, one of my friends, both whom are the writers of their own, played the character and I played the world. And then so I start with that. So I have a lot of dialogue and some description, and then I'm turning that into a book. And it's a lot harder than it sounds because
is that how they become co-authors on it?
right, exactly.
Gotcha.
One of them is basically all she does. She occasionally makes some suggestions. The other one's really actively involved and is actually working on helping convert the files and things like that. So, it's a different amounts of co-authoring. But it sounds like it would be easy because I have a whole chapter. It has both action and conversation. But of course, when you're playing the game, you're not writing down what the character feels. You're not putting in the real details. You're not necessarily being careful about speaking the way they would speak. So it turns out to be a lot of work sometimes. Some of the chapters convert really easily. But I think I mentioned that I saved myself 6 months of time by letting Grok translate, move it from second person present tense to third person past tense. Took about 2-3 minutes per file.
Nice.
And that was something that for me, because you're going through, you're trying to notice every time you accidentally said has rather than had, and then you come back weeks later and you've missed 6 of them. So for me, that was a real time saver. I was just so overjoyed to be able to do that. And it wasn't a creative thing. It was just like, hiring a secretary to do a lot of cut and pasting. But yeah, so that really helped a lot.
I like that, getting back to the multimodal theme, I like that you are creating books based on games that you played.
Yeah, it's actually quite cool. I have a book that I'm not doing anything with right now because it was the beginning of a series that for various reasons I don't want to work on at the moment. That was entirely based on a game that is run at least 30 years.
Did you say 30 years?
30 years, yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, it started in 86. It's almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that technically it's lit RPG because it's a literary version of a role-playing game. But because the role-playing game was carefully designed to play like a novel with no external leveling up or anything like that, it was all done within the story. It doesn't read like a lit RPG. So you couldn't really sell it as a lit RPG, even though it actually is a lit RPG, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, the game was started by my husband before I married him. And he made it so that instead of like you level up by, I go and I kill a monster and now I read a chart and I'm 4th level, you level up by doing things in the game that within the game figure out how to get more power or you train or you go take a magic test and at the end of the test you have a power and then you have to figure out how the power works by trying to use it. So as a game, it was really interesting and really fun. And it was like playing in your favorite novel. But it doesn't have all the cool leveling up that's really popular right now with lit RPG and with isekais. So, it kind of ironically goes the other way.
Let's hear about that. What are the cool leveling up things that are happening in lit RPG and isekai?
Well, I've watched a couple of isekais, but on Thursday nights we watch with a friend for an hour, and we've watched a couple of them. And it amuses me tremendously because when I was first in publishing in the 80s, if there was one thing they were going to list that they would say never do, it was write like it was a role-playing game, like it was D&D. But this has turned out to be tremendously popular, both in books and in anime, because when you have a way for the same reason it's popular in a game, you come in and you're watching your character and there's an outside standard by which you can see that the character is progressing. And you can, and so they make it interesting for the same reasons that playing a game, it's interesting. That, oh, here my character has this power, and look how the power is being used, to would strengthen herself or himself, and now he's going to go fight another enemy. Oh, look, isn't that cool? He's gotten access to a new skill or whatever. So you're just watching the type of thing that a lot of people play anyway, and they're using the very thing that makes a game interesting to make the story interesting. And I just thought it was hilarious because I couldn't think of anything that would have been turned down quicker by the publishers in New York in the 80s, but it's really effective. Now, I don't know, it might be really effective partially because 40 additional years of people playing these games have made them feel very comfortable with them. I'm not sure it would have done well back then, but it's still kind of funny that don't put in any of the mechanics. Well, the mechanics are enjoyable to people, and so these fields are doing very well.
That's what I think is probably the factor there, is that you've got, decades of fandom that have been building up, and there's parts of the thing that they like in a player sense, and there's parts of things they like in a viewer sense, and they're happy to be a viewer as well.
Right. It's both that it can make it interesting and that it's familiar. Oh, look, isn't this fun? This is like my favorite video game, but I'm watching it, or I'm reading it.
Yeah.
I understand that the lit RPGs do really well. I talked at one point with a guy who was making a lot of money writing this. They do really well as ebooks because they're enjoyed by truck drivers. And this guy told me that anything truck drivers want to listen to does really well because there's a lot of them. They have a lot of hours, and if they like something, they go back looking for more, and they tell their buddies. So one of the areas that it's kind of story you can listen to while you're driving along is a lit RPG story. It's one of the very popular with truck drivers. I thought that was cool.
We got Graham. He's going to be in the sale as well.
Excellent.
Our attendant truck driver in the scene.
Cool.
Truck driving writer in the scene. I want to put that part in because he's got the book.
But that falls in with what you're saying about, the multimedia. You could theoretically have a game, and then the novel that goes with the game, and then the audio book that goes with it, and then, get an AI together and make a little video to go with it. And this is stuff that a few years ago was impossible. But now it's possible, and it's not just possible, it's possible to a large degree for the average person because of like the AI videos and stuff like that. Not that you don't have to learn something new or put out a little effort, but there's a lot of things that you used to not be able to do unless you had more money than the average individual usually ever has to spend, that now you can do just by putting in some know-how, spending some time learning it, and spending maybe a small amount of money, a reasonable amount of money for a normal person. So I think it's really cool. I love seeing what's going on with it.
Yeah, I would say in the general sense, I don't think it's ever been easier to explore media creation and publishing or video making, filmmaking, music making. And we see a lot of this stuff coming out, probably more than has ever been created. There's also this consolidation, I would say, that's been occurring in tandem with that, where even though we have all of these like subgenres that we'll talk about or whatever, in the larger sense, really, we've kind of like very much distilled down to, a few successful things in over the last maybe 10 years or so. What we'll see 10, 15 years, you see like in film that the comic book movies had just a huge run And then in music, you have very basic, straightforward, like radio pop and hip hop that kind of just took over and dominated. In literature, I would say maybe the like popular science sort of like thing was very dominant, where it was just to me it's schlocky, but a lot of people like it. And that's not to say that I don't read some of that stuff or listen to some of that stuff. I do, just to keep up with it. But like what I mean is like where they try and educate you on something, but then they use all these anecdotes, constant anecdotes inside of there. And it's like, this book is 2/3 just schlock. This could have been a really tight book of getting to the point if I didn't have to read all these like very kind of ideological examples that were tossed in there.
I've noticed that with a number of things that I've read, that really, you could really fascinate me if this book was a page and a half. I mean, not that everything in the book is necessarily not worth it, but I often feel like, I really wish you would just not have to put in all this other stuff. So often they'll start with I used to read near-death experience books. And I'm not saying that knowing more about the person didn't help. I mean, if you sat and read the whole book, usually it was enjoyable. But honestly, the stuff I was looking for was usually one chapter. It's like, I wish somewhere you didn't have to feel you had to set it up with your whole life story, and you just I want that one chapter. That's just an example, but I've noticed that with a lot of things, that they'll just be like, here's the principles of this really neat new idea you have, and I think I could get it into about a page and a half, maybe 4 pages, and the rest of it is just presentation. And I understand why they do it, but I kind of wish I had the short version.
It's hard to sell pamphlets.
Exactly. I mean, that's why, and that's why I say I have complete sympathy, but I still wish I can. But yeah, so I don't know as much about, like, I don't really know anything about marketing side of music, but I know that in the books right now, which is very different from movies. Movies have some other way of getting in front of us, but in books, one of the big things right now is your book in a category that people are searching for?
Oh, of course.
And that's something that's never come up before in history. If you just so happen to have a phrase like romantasy or lit RPG or whatever your phrase is that fits your book, you come to the attention of all the truck drivers or all the young ladies or whoever it is who's looking for that. And if you have a really good book, but it just happens to be a little different, these were always a bit of a risk, but when they were in bookstores with a nice cover, it was less of a risk than it is right now. And yet, tastes change, things change, something that was new, catches on. So, it's not like we shouldn't be doing them, but we don't have in our current setup, I think, a good marketing idea for things that don't fall easily into the things people are already searching for. And, it's just a hurdle that we didn't have before.
Well, here's the thing about this. I want to delineate the term marketing from what we're maybe more particularly talking about, which is promotion. Making people aware of the existence of, the work. And if you want to make it easy, make it feel like it's going downhill, well, then you really want to flip it around and say, like, well, what are people searching for? And like, I want to be at the bottom of the hill, catching the people coming downhill like little butterflies into my net. That's to invert the idea, so that's something that I think I'm kind of discovering a little bit of, this year has definitely been strong so far for me. We're only a third of it done, but like, well, if it stays at the pace that it is, then, that'd be fantastic. But it is also partially about, really looking at data and looking at keywords and stuff like that to find how to fit in.
Yeah. I do think authors fall into two categories, and I'm not saying anything good or bad about either of these. Some of them are people who can look at what's out there and go, hey, I could write a lit RPG, and they sit down and they do it, which is great. I have some friends who've done really well doing things like that. And then others are people who they have a story, and that's the story they find themselves able to write. And right now it's not fitting in a box. And then those are the ones that have they, they can look for ways to try to capitalize on any way that the story they have happens to overlap something that's popular.
Mm.
But I think some writers have a quick ability to go, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and pick what they're writing, and some writers don't. Whatever story it is they feel they have is the story they have, and they might be lucky in that it might turn out within the next 10, 20 years that an upward going wave picks them up.
Yeah.
But they don't know ahead of time that that's going to happen. So
Sure. Well, hey, Jaji, I got to wrap it up for today. I do appreciate you coming and hanging out and talking shop for a while.
Sorry I didn't get there earlier, but it's always really nice to talk to you, and I'll add you to my my list, and I'll send you a link.
Yeah, for sure. And then Ricky and I will be hosting Writer's Block while Heidi is out next week.
Well, hopefully I'll see you guys then.
Yeah, come and chat with us. We're going to be talking about creative integration. As it turns out, I got to get that scheduled. I thought I'd have it done already today, and I'm slacking, but that's okay. I'll get it up.
Thank you.
Hey, enjoy your day, and we'll talk again before too long.